a brief statement on the protocols to be followed during this remote meeting. Please note that this meeting is broadcast live on YouTube and a recording will be made available for public viewing following the meeting. Can members please mute their microphones throughout the meeting when not speaking? This is important since it helps to ensure the quality of the audio for all present. Your microphone should be switched on when invited to speak and switched off when you have finished speaking. Please use the raise hand button to indicate that you wish to speak at any point. Can I also ask the officers introduce themselves by confirming their name and role before speaking for the first time on any item? If any members lose connection or have any technical difficulties during the meeting, please alert the clerk as soon as possible, either using the chat function within the meeting or by email, telephone. I'll now ask the clerk to carry out a roll call of the elected members participating in the meeting. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Brisley.
Present.
Councillor Graham Houston.
Present.
And Councillor Jim Thompson.
Present. And we have, prior to the meeting, agreed that I chair the meeting, so that covers item 2 on the agenda. There are no apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? None. Okay. In way of introduction, as I said, I'm chairing the meeting. I'm joined by fellow councillors, Councillor Graham Houston and Councillor Margaret Brisley. Also in the meeting today is Ewan Grant from Legal Services and Richard Callender, who is our planning advisor. Sheila McLean is clerking the meeting, and Ewan McTaggart is here as IT support. Given it's the first meeting we've done live, we felt it appropriate to have somebody in attendance who could keep us right and make sure things go okay. So that's the meeting. Ewan and Richard are advisors and will play no part other than to advise the members. And if I could perhaps ask Ewan to, Richard to give a brief statement on the application for review. This is item 4, erection of 4 dwelling houses at Stockiemuir gun site at Blanefield. Richard, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. With reference to the agenda papers and background information, Mr Stuart McGarvey, planning consultant on behalf of Mr Derek Kilgoyne, Camera Homes Limited, seeking a review of a delegated decision to refuse planning permission. This is for the erection of 4 dwelling houses land at Stockiemuir gun site, Blanefield, on the A809 Drumbrae Road. Refused under delegated powers on the 12th of May 2021, reference 21-00191 full. Reference to the agenda papers, the application for review statement and supporting documents are pages 1 to 82. These documents are listed in page 12 and include a design and access statement, access observation, stage 1 road safety report, report of handling and decision notice. The reasons for your refusal are, in the opinion of the planning authority, the proposal fails to comply with policy 1.1 of the local development plan, specifically criteria E, since the proposal cannot be accessed safely due to an increase in turning manoeuvres on the A809 public road, which will result in an unacceptable impact on road safety. I'll just now share a presentation for members and others attending today's meeting in the usual format. Does anything come up there?
Not yet.
No, okay, just bear with me. Something come up there now, can that be seen?
Yeah, we've got that, Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a presentation showing plans and photographs of the site in the usual format. So the application site is on the A809 Stockiemuir, a former sort of gun emplacement site dating from the early 1950s. Just to have a bit more context for the location, for the information of the members, the A809 is known as the Stockiemuir Road or the Drumbrae Road. It runs from the outskirts like in a Milgai through to Drummond. Access is Loch Lomond as well. Local contact, the Queen's View, quite a famous viewpoint, and it then starts to drop down towards kind of Croft-Tammy direction. A more detailed plan of the proposal is to replace under the brownfield criteria in housing and countryside 4 of the plinths, as it were, for the guns with 4 dwelling houses. New access to be taken from the 8 or 9 as per the details here. The existing access to the site is from shared access with 2 cottages, Wayside Cottage and Queen's View, which also leads into the site as it is at present. The new access that will be formed has been designed in accordance with the relevant engineering standards and have been discussed with Stirling Council Road Service and agreed to in terms of the relevant standards and design criteria. Photographs itself, this is taken from more or less directly opposite where the access position would be on the road. Currently there's an area of woodland that sort of fronts the site. Looking to the northwest along Drummond Road, and the other direction looking to the southeast, the longer distance view which shows the site frontage. Currently some remains of some security fencing in it.
Richard, may I interrupt? You seem to be talking 2 pictures, but all I've got is the initial application for local review and erection of 4 dwelling houses. So I've got number 11 slides. I don't know how you...
Has none of the slides come up, Councillor Houston? No, is that the same for everybody?
I've just got the first slide.
We're stuck in slide 1, yeah.
I beg your pardon,
Yes.
I'll try again. Is that working okay?
That's
working.
That's
That's
working.
working now.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, beg your pardon. It does depend on which view you use. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, again, back to the beginning then. Apologies. 809 Stockiemuir Road, otherwise known as Drummond Road, is the location of this proposed redevelopment of a former gun emplacements with 4 dwelling houses. The application was considered acceptable in principle in terms of complying with housing and countryside policy. The main issue, as it will be indicated, is the issue with the access and the proximity to the existing access to other properties, Wayside Cottage and Queen's View. Again, just run through the photographs and plans in a bit more detail. As I said, the access is taken onto the country road, 67 to 60 mile an hour, the 809 runs from the outskirts of Milgai and towards Croft-Tammy and eventually towards Drummond. The site itself, this is a site plan showing the red line boundary, proposes to redevelop the 4 gun emplacements with 4 dwelling houses, the gun emplacements, the general site being deemed as Brownfield site, and therefore deemed to accord with the housing and countryside policy. On that basis, the new access taken on to Drummond Road. A bit more detail, the design details of the access comply with the relevant design and engineering standards and have been discussed with the road service. Site itself, some photographs. This is looking towards the site from Drummond Road, more or less at the position of the new access and new junction. This is looking from the access point northwest along the road towards Drummond, looking the other way, heading back towards Milgai and into Glasgow. So that's looking in a southeast direction. A longer view showing the access point, maybe just if we can follow the cursor, possibly somewhere about here. This is a view of the existing access to Wayside Cottage and Queen's View. So looking northwest, so again, access would be very roughly sort of the midpoint of the sort of wooded frontage to the site. And this also serves the existing site, which has a history of commercial use. And looking in another direction, so that's Wayside Cottage here, the access, there's another cottage just to the left of that. In the presentation, apologies for that, members.
Okay, thank you, Richard. The The next stage of the process is for elected members to question the officers on the application, and then
So,
we'll...
I've got a wee bit more to go in the presentation.
Apologies, Richard. I thought that was it.
I usually just go through points in the papers, informational members and others about the watching. So just to clarify what's in there, it says about over 100 pages, so there's quite a lot of information there. The continuation of the papers is the internal and external consultation responses and representation from neighbours at Wayside Cottage and Criftami Community Council, pages 83 to 100. Further comments from the planning application case officer in response to the application for review, pages 101 to 102. Further comments from Historic Environment Scotland and neighbours at Wayside Cottage in response to the review, pages 103 to 108. Proposed conditions 109 to 110. I would advise the review body at this stage that in the event the LRB is minded to allow the review, then the decision notice should also be subject to a Section 75 agreement prior to its issue to secure the off-site developer contributions towards affordable housing. This is a financial contribution in line with standard requirements. Applicants and agents' response to the draft conditions and further representations, pages 111 to 112. And relevant development plan policies and supplementary guidance are outlined in pages 113 to 116. A very brief summary of the review statement. The principle of the reuse, this is in the view of the agent, complies with policy 210 housing and countryside and associated local development plan policies, as confirmed by the case officer's comments in the report of handling. The design and new access is considered acceptable to the council's transport development management team. The focus of the review is therefore on the supplementary recommendation to close an existing private access, which serves 2 cottages out with the applicant's control. This reason for refusal is based upon the recommendations from the Senior Development Control Infrastructure Officer that once the new access was opened, the existing private access serving 2 dwelling houses, known as Queensview and Wayside Cottage, as well as the former gun emplacement site, should be enclosed. In the view of the agent, this is considered ultra vires and unreasonable, as the applicant has no legal control over the existing private access. The application red line boundary does not include the private existing access. Therefore, to determine the application or placing a condition on this matter is erroneous, with the legislative remit of the planning and the road service. The recommendation also conflicts with a number of recent planning approvals for similar uses along Stockiemuir Road. It is also requested that a hearing take place and an accompanied site visit, which will clearly portray the site and development proposal, notably the proposed new access. Okay, in the presentation, sorry, apologies for the earlier mishap on the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, thank you.
No, thanks, Richard. That was my fault. I should have appreciated there's a bit more to it than that. No, thanks, Richard. As I was going to say, we ask questions of the officers present, and then we will make a decision as to whether we've got sufficient information to make a decision today or to go through a hearing, etc. So I'll invite questions to the officers. Councillor Brisley.
Can I ask, on page 111, the applicant's agent has stated that they consider the recommendation to close the other access to be ultra-virus because the applicant doesn't have that within the site boundary. Could I get advice on that, please?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. I mean, the situation really is that the applications have been refused because of the 2 accesses will be provided together. Now, that's not ultra vires in its own right. That just takes into account the particular circumstances along the stretch of road where we have an existing access which serves Wayside Cottage and Queensview Cottage, and an additional access And as is outlined in the road services comments, there is a policy to minimise the amount of new accesses onto any classified road, or indeed any country road, I think. Therefore, from a road safety point of view, the situation of 2 accesses is deemed to be unacceptable from road safety grounds. But the report of handling, if I can refer you to comments made in that, which sums up the position. If you refer to page 79 of the agenda papers, and the paragraph at the bottom of that page, so it does say, however, the applicant does not have the legal right to close this access, and it is out with the development site, and a planning condition cannot be placed on the application to this effect as it is unachievable. So certainly Stirling Council Planning Service has a policy that you have to demonstrate sufficient control over land in order to place a condition on which might relate to development, land out with the red site boundary, or the red line boundary of the site, I should say. So, and the conclusion is, as such, due to the inability of the applicant to secure the closure of the existing access, which would have allowed vehicle movements to be concentrated to a single point, it is deemed that an increase in turning movements of the road would result in detrimental impact on road safety. So really, it's the road safety reason has been the reason for refusing permission, but consideration has been given to the option of perhaps securing the closure through a condition, but that is deemed to be unachievable. Therefore, we have a situation of the road safety considerations really relating to 2 accesses being, in the view of the road service, too close together, and that in itself can justify refusing planning permission under the relevant development plan policies. Okay.
That doesn't answer the question. Is it ultra virus for us to put on a condition, because it was all about, it was out with the red boundary, the boundary of the site. They don't control it, but it's a question of it being ultra virus for us to do this, and for us to put that recommendation in the first place.
So Ewan, do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, so perhaps I explain. No, it's not ultra virus. It could be done. You can impose what was a negative condition saying, effectively, you cannot do X unless Y has happened beforehand. For example, the house to be built on this site cannot be occupied unless suitable road safety measures have been implemented beforehand. But whether that condition is used or not is a planning matter, not a legal matter. It is simply an option available to the planning authority. The fact the ground is not owned by the applicant, not owned in his control, is not sufficient reason for not using the condition. Developers and applicants face various difficulties which may involve acquiring control of ground they do not own. This is just an example.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can I expand on that aspect of it? Not the ultra virus element, that's been covered, but if you turn to page 66 of the road safety audit, they make the recommendation that the access is closed, and Richard, you refer to policy, but this has come from the safety audit. It doesn't expand on the reasons, and I'm going to ask the question which perhaps you can't answer, and therefore it may need a further meeting to answer this. There is a design manual for roads, and I'm presuming the design manual tells you how close together junctions can be on the same side of the road. I would have thought if that is the case, that should have been said in the safety audit.
Yes, the asking into advice, which is possibly beyond my professional remit at the moment, councillor. So I will, and I have checked with the road service. There is higher level guidance that points to consideration needing to be given to the amount of accesses coming onto a road. But it's in the mix with a lot of other things, including the characteristics of the road itself and the speed of the drivers, the volume of traffic on that road. So really, it does come down to a sort of case-by-case assessment as to whether that needs to be is a strong enough reason for refusal. So there's not any definite guidance, as far as I'm aware, on specific minimum separation distances between access. It also depends on the amount of traffic that's going to be coming from the new access onto the road as well. And that could vary from, you know, a single dwelling house to maybe multiple dwelling houses, 4 in this case, plus the existing what's left of the remainder of the site, maybe at some point in the future, or use that might be done to. So yeah, there is guidance on good practice, but not any definite standards as far as I'm aware. It has to be a sort of case-by-case assessment that's made by the Roads Authority, not especially Stirling. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I take that point, but I'm guessing if it's been specified through the road safety audit, which is I believe is independent, then there must be a basis on which that recommendation has been made, but it's not elaborate. It's implicit, but not elaborated on. So I'm of the view, councillors, that I would like to have a bit more understanding of the road safety element to this, and for that reason, I would prefer that this is deferred to get that additional information. Councillor Houston, have you got any? Oh, Margaret, you've still got your hand up. Sorry. No further questions. No. Councillor Houston, have you got any questions to ask at this stage?
I think my questions were also in the same area, but I think what you're saying, as the whole premise of this being rejected is about the access and the vehicle movements. I think it's right that we get that further information. So I'd be comfortable delaying this until we had that.
Okay. Right. So we will follow this up by asking for additional information. Councillor Brisley? Yes,
just to say I totally agree with that, because the road safety issue seems to be the road access seems to be the only issue really that is causing the recommendation for refusal.
Okay. Right. On that basis, we will follow this up the second meeting. There is a request for a hearing and a site visit. I personally don't feel that we need a site visit. I'm content to have a hearing, if that's agreeable to the other member.
Yes, I think that's only fair.
Yes. Agreed.
Sheila, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to confirm now you've mentioned a hearing as well, just so we can clarify exactly what the nature of the further information you require in the written submission. Or it may be that could be included in a hearing statement if we're going to have a hearing as well. So just so we can be clear about the information that's being asked for, please.
Okay, the hearing is agreed. The applicant has asked for that. The questions around the road safety audit, an explanation. The recommendation on page 66, Sheila, is the access is closed and access to Queen's View and Wayside Cottage are provided from within the development. It's the reasons why that statement has been made. Is there national specification or is it local policy? But it's very clear it's come from the safety audit, and an explanation of that would be helpful. So a written statement to that effect.
Okay, thank you. So the written statement would come from the planning authority, and am I understanding that correctly, rather than the applicant?
Well, I think our officers have got to justify why they've taken this statement from the safety audit and then carried that through to a planning decision.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
But the applicant will have the opportunity. He will he, she, I'm not sure who did the application. They will have heard what we're talking about, and hopefully they will be prepared for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are we agreed? A hearing and additional information to be brought forward to the next meeting. Thank you. We now move on to the next item, which is item 5, application for review, installation of new Portakabin building to accommodate employees. And this is at Blairlogie. Richard, I'll pass on to you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. This review has been submitted by Cundall Johnson and Partners on behalf of Mr. Tom Cox of the Alex McNichol Cox Trust, and are seeking a review of a condition attached to the planning permission for a Portakabin building to accommodate employees of the adjacent laboratory building. There's land adjacent and east of Manor Farm, Children's Nursery, Manor Loan, Blairlogie. Reference number 210075, full approved on the 7th of April 2021. So the review relates to a condition that's been attached to that permission. The application review includes a review statement and a report of handling, pages 117 to 125. Building warrant application plans have been included as part of the review submission as supporting documents, and these illustrate the more developed submissions that ensued from the planning permission. Consultation response from the Council's Road Service and representation from the Scottish Wildlife Trust, pages 135 to 136. Decision notice and planning application plans are pages 137 to 144. It is condition 1 in the decision notice that is subject to the application for review, i.e. that the approval of the proposed building shall cease on or before 30th of April 2026, at which date the building shall be removed and the land restored to its former condition. The reason for imposing condition is the use of the land is of a temporary nature and is only acceptable as a temporary expedient. A further explanation for imposing a condition can be found in the assessment section of the case officer's report handling on page 114. And again, just to give a more background for the members' information, I'll just go through our presentation. Get it going. Zach, can you see our front page, members, of application for local review relating to this site?
No, it's still Blanefield that's up, Richard.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about this. Close that one down. Sorry, beg your pardon. Oh, there we go. Yeah, about that, is that coming up now, members?
Yep.
And is it moving? Can I scroll through it? Is that coming up?
Yes,
okay?
yep, working fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the application site is part of a larger business park located at Manor Park off Manor Loan, sort of Blairlogie, east of Stirling direction. Manor Farm Business Park's the name of the complex of buildings. The A09 Allan Road there, so just north of the A9, it's got its own junction onto Manor Loan. The Portakabin office is, say, the star marks the approximate position of that in plan, location plan here. Portakabin office outlined there in more detail. The building itself measures about 20 metres by about 12 metres, single-storey flat roof structure, internal floor plan, open plan, internal arrangement. Now, I'll just run through a sequence of photographs. The building actually is in situ. So these were photographs taken a few days ago. So that's the structure there. Then just a series of views, sort of receding from the building, as it were. Another view showing the existing commercial buildings and the remains of the original farmhouse there. Going back again, a bit more detail with the buildings, the Portakabin down to the right behind the tree here. A further view again, so again illustrating the setting of the building in terms of local landscape and tree growth and existing structures. A view from the sort of secondary access into the business park. So the building sort of sits behind, again, the original farmhouse here. A longer distance view from A907, again showing the landscape setting. and the materials on the existing buildings, which comprises of the use of some of the masonry stonework in the original farm buildings and sort of profiled sheeting on the walls and roof of the building. Okay, end of presentation. Let's return to the presentation. The proposed conditions and relevant development plan policy are pages 145 to 148. These are policy 1 site planning, policy 25 employment development. Review statement states that condition 1 notes that only temporary permission was granted for 5 years. This is incidentally included in the submission for review, rather than a separate statement. However, our planning application was not for a temporary building, and we disagree that it is not considered to be in keeping with the predominant architectural style of the area, being agricultural design. The area in question was formerly agricultural, but now predominantly a business park with industrial style buildings. May be considered a proposed unit suitable for the setting. Okay, thank you. End of presentation.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Any questions to the officers? Richard, the page 135, it's come from development control in a response, and it kind of hints that the application is for the erection of a temporary building. Now, I'm guessing, and to anybody's mouth, but a Portakabin by its nature is temporary. Has that led officers to believe that the structure was there for temporary? Because that seems to be the crux of the argument.
The building, there's this sort of generic term, Portakabin, which does come into play when people will maybe describe temporary buildings. And in this case, Portakabin are also the sort of manufactured and presumably never installed the building itself. So the reason perhaps is best kind of laid out in the report of handling, where I cross-reference to the background as to why the temporary permission was put on. The case being put forward by the agents, the architects, as it doesn't mention anywhere, that it was to be a temporary building, and the supporting documents they've submitted, the building warrant plans, do show considerable sort of on-site preparation and provision of services to really, although it's not specifically stated, but indicates it's more than something just coming off the back of a lorry, I can put it that way, and being put down on a site maybe for a short-term kind of expedient reasons. That this is really intended to be here for a good while, albeit it's not a building that's, for example, has its own sort of foundations. It's really design-wise up over and above what you would normally kind of maybe visualise when somebody describes a building as a Portakabin building. It's a modular building in its own right. So, and again, the photographs and the plans show that it's a building of substance, if I could put it that way, if not necessarily a full sort of properly founded structure, as with the other buildings within the site. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know you can't answer my point specifically, but I just get the impression reading the document that people have assumed it's a Portakabin, therefore it's temporary, therefore it's been considered as a temporary document. I don't get that from the report of handling personally, but Councillor Houston?
Yeah, thank you. When I read page 124 of the report of handling, it suggests to me that because of the manufacturer is called Portakabin, the whole structure is Portakabin. I would more look upon it as a modular construction, or modular offices, if you like, a modular building. But it talks about typical Portakabin style, and it kind of leads you down a road of thinking it. But it also suggests that because of COVID-19 testing requirement, there's a kind of urgency here. So we'll say yes. There's a sort of reluctance in the on behalf of the planners to agree with this. But I have to say that I think the design and finish and what we've seen seems to me to be in keeping with an industrial setting. Absolutely. Acceptable.
Councillor, we're kind of straying into a decision mode.
Yeah.
There's questions to the officers at the minute.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. Margaret, any? No? Okay. Okay, the next stage then is to decide, do we have sufficient information today to deal with this, or do we want more information? There's no request for a hearing that I can see, so I'm of the view we could make a decision today.
I'm happy to make a decision today, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Houston, you've kind of made your comments. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes, when looking at the presentation and the setting, it is an established business park, if you like. I think we can get misled by talking about Portakabins, and I know when I think of a Portakabin, I've probably got in my mind Portakabins of old as I would have known them. But the company producing now these modular buildings, I think, are really quite sophisticated, and the glass frontages that we saw in the both in the plan submitted and the photographs that were given to us, I think it makes it quite an appropriate setting and allows for other expansion, etc., within the area. So on that basis, I would be happy to overrule the temporary nature of it and agree with what I think was initially sought, because there was no reference in the initial application for it to be temporary.
Councillor Brisley?
I'm in two minds because it states in the report that it's not in keeping, although that's an industrial site. The buildings that we saw were all stone-built buildings round about, and I'm not too sure if I agree that the building is in keeping with what is in the surrounding area. I'm still pondering that at the moment.
Okay. I'll happily give my view. I visited the site when it was getting built, so I'm aware of the industrial nature. Now, I don't know if I'm allowed to take that into account, as perhaps both of you may not have been to the site. But it is industrial buildings, and I think you can see from the photographs that it is of that nature. It isn't an agricultural site, there's no doubt about that, but it has been built on the basis that it will provide employment, etc. Therefore, it was given planning permission. I can't remember the date, etc. I go along with Councillor Houston. I think it was intended to be permanent. If you look at the scale of it, it's modular construction. There's no doubt about that, but it's built and properly maintained. You ought to get at least 10, if not 20 years out of this building. So I'm of the view that we support it, but I would like to look at a couple of conditions, if this is at all possible, and I'll ask officers. In the report of handling, there is a concern from the Wildlife Trust about losing trees. Can we request that whatever trees are taken down, some are replanted either on the site or near the site? That's the first point. And secondly, can we ask that the colour of the building matches closely to what's already built, so it better blends in? Are those reasonable conditions?
The first one, I mean, the building's in situation, so we would have to establish if any trees have actually been taken down. I appreciate the Scottish Wildlife Trust did identify that, so maybe require an indication, perhaps from a site survey they might have done in advance of the installation of the building to confirm what trees have actually been removed. But it's reasonable to ask for replacement trees. In any circumstance, it's actually a duty in the Planning Act to that effect, that proper account's taken of loss of trees in any planning determination. I would have to disagree, Councillor Thompson, in the second condition. The nature of these buildings is such that the external materials tend to be pre-coated with a finish, which has been, as it were, already included in the design. So it would be difficult. You could perhaps, in advance of the installation of the building, have considered the external materials, but that has been installed as it is now. Saying that, to qualify that slightly, there was a requirement for the condition 2 on the planning permission that external materials be submitted for consideration of the planning authority, and that had, as far as I can see, hasn't been done. The building's been installed, but I would have to double check as to whether that condition has been complied with, because that would have gone to the case officer and wouldn't necessarily appear on the public files, as it were. So on 2 points, I think we really need to check on both matters, but to change the colour of the building as currently installed in terms of the external finishing would be probably beyond what can be done. It's not simply a matter of applying colour to sort of plain sheeting. It would have to be, I would imagine that almost you have to sort of take these buildings as they come, and the guarantee that would come with an external finish would be undermined, or the durability of that would be undermined with any further treatment, i.e. maybe painting.
Thanks. It's maybe something that we can ask them to look at. Councillor Houston?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points. It does say in the report of handling that the finishing details of the building are still to be finalised, or it's considered that an acceptable finish could be reached and details of that would be required. So I would assume that has been submitted and agreed to. But I wanted to address Councillor Brisley's concern about that it wasn't fitting in. The only other, I know the site because I visited businesses on the site a few times, and the only building that's a stone built is actually the old farmhouse, which I think was planned to be a nursery, etc., and is in a pretty sad state of disrepair now. And the rest of it is all kind of corrugated structures of an industrial type. So that's why I say I think it perfectly well fits into that kind of industrial setting. I think we saw the pictures of the farmhouse with obviously unoccupied, etc., and crying out for redevelopment, if you like. But the rest of the site is an agricultural, is a industrial setting in doing that. I think Mr. Callender, when he showed us that presentation, had in some of those photographs made that clear. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to agree with Councillor Houston and the building and those conditions. I think replacement of the trees. I certainly believe, and you say yourself that can be done through planning. And if we can look at the building and it can be made to match better using the report of handling recommendation, I'm content with that. So, Councillor Brisley?
Yeah, I can go along with that. I don't know the site. I was only going by the photographs that looked as though it was more stone-built buildings that were round about it. I've got a wee concern because obviously this building is there, so this is a retrospective application, and although you're stating there should have been some kind of control over the materials and the colour of the building, we have to accept what's there. That bothers me a bit. I can go along with, as you've both said, you know the site and it is more an industrial site, but I think they've gone beyond a bit and just put the building there without I mean, I don't know if there was any reference to the planning authority. Certainly when I looked at it, it talked about either a grey or that kind of bluey colour. And my first thought was the bluey colour would stand out like a sore thumb when I was reading the application. But what's the effect if we put some kind of condition in about the colour and we find out there was no consultation with the planning officer about the colour of the building and it doesn't meet the needs and it doesn't blend in properly? What do we do in that situation?
Okay. Richard, do you want to come in then? Oh no, Sheila, you've taken your hand down. Richard.
Yeah, just to confirm, councillors and Councillor Bisley, it's not a retrospective application. The building has planning permission, subject to two conditions. One is the condition that's under the current application for review, which is a temporary condition, and the second condition relates to the requirement to submit materials prior to the building being put aside. I'll just check the exact wording of that condition if you just hold on, please. It's 137. Yes, this was a standard condition prior to commencement of development. Samples or a brochure of all materials to be used on external surfaces, respective type, colour and texture shall be submitted. Now, normally at this stage of an application, once a decision's been made and a delegate decision is case, that would really involve dialogue between the applicant and the case officer. I don't have access to that information at the moment, but it's something I can check to see whether that is. So there may well have been agreement on the nature of the materials. I'd have to double check on that to be sure. But also, in some ways, the fact it's a temporary building means that you would accept a reasonably, as envisaged under the decision notice, you would perhaps expect maybe more utilitarian colours, if I can put it that way, as opposed to something that you would perhaps spend more time on if it was to be a permanent structure, including, as a point's been made, about maybe trying to blend it in. And that perhaps is one of the reasons for the temporary decision in the first place, is it doesn't quite look in line with the buildings round about, but recognising the expediency of the need for the building, therefore a sort of compromise has been reached, as it were, between the sort of case officer and the applicant, recognising the importance of the building's function in relation to production of COVID testing kits. But then that's led to the temporary condition that's been put on, and the subsequent concerns as expressed to the review that actually we were thinking of a permanent building all along. And again, I might also, sorry, Councillor Thompson, the point about the trees. I mean, you don't normally ask for additional tree planting in relation to a temporary building, whereas a permanent structure, you might look to see some screening or trees to provide a landscape setting for the structure. But equally, if trees had to be taken down, I think it would be reasonable to ask for these to be replaced, even if it was a temporary structure.
Well, yeah. Richard, I've listened to what you said to Councillor Brisley, and I've got to say that we're going to give permission for it to be a permanent structure. Therefore, I think we are entitled to put conditions on this. So there is a difference. And screening might be a solution rather than changing the colour, but I would at least like to think that we're doing our best to try and make the building compatible with what's in the surrounding areas. Screening is an appropriate way to go about this. Councillor Houston?
Yeah, I think if screening can be included in it, because there was an expectation that even if it was temporary, when it was removed, it would go back to its original state. Therefore, more trees would have been, well, trees were taken down when the temporary structure was put in. Therefore, it would be expected you'd reinstate what was there. So we're making it temporary, making it permanent, which I would support. Then the replacing those trees that were removed somewhere and that made that into a form of screening, I think would be an appropriate condition to apply.
Richard, you still got your hand up?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I beg your pardon.
Right, I certainly want to ensure that we are not compromising ourselves. I believe by us making the decision for it to be permanent, we have a degree of control over how this building is dealt with. So I'm of the view, as Councillor Houston has said, that we approve this, but on the condition that the trees are replaced and some form of screening, whether it's the colour of the building as well, but at least planting goes in to try and blend the building in a bit better, assuming the colours can't be changed. So that's the decision. Councillor Brisley, do you want to either add to that or?
No, I can go along with that.
Okay. So effectively it's a unanimous decision. Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6, application for review, erection of 5 holiday accommodation units, retrospective at Pendreich Road, Bridge of Allan. Richard?
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is in relation to property Drumbrae Farm. DM Hall on behalf of Mrs. Susan Dixon seeking a review of a delegated decision to refuse planning permission. So 5 number holiday accommodation units, office, cafe and toilets, retrospective application, reference number 2000685 full, Drumbrae Farm, Pendreich Road, Bridge of Allan. Refused under delegated powers on 28th of July 2021. Reference to agenda papers, application for review and review statement, and supporting documents, pages 149 to 155. Plan application form, decision notice and report of handling, pages 156 to 70. Reason for refusal is the opinion of the planning authority the development has been unable to ensure a safe means of access. Scale of development is expected to generate a significant increase in the number of vehicle movements at the access junction. As such, interest of road safety, the visibility display of 2.4 metres by 70 metres should be provided. Due to the positioning of an existing building sited at the junction, visibility to the right-hand side north of the junction is restricted, with the building limiting the display to a distance much shorter than that which would be found to be acceptable. An access appraisal prepared in response to the road service consultation response to the planning applications, pages 171 to 178. Application plans and supporting landscape and visual appraisal, pages 111 to 212. Again, just to illustrate some of this, I'll just go through our presentation. Does that come up, members? Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Did it scroll through okay as well? Right, okay, thank you.
It does.
Does that come up okay? Thank you. The application site is within a kind of complex of buildings, Drumbrae Farm, Farm Stirling basically, and the applicant has developed a small scale tourism development comprising pods, other structures to provide accommodation, the cafe as mentioned in the application description. The application say the developer proceeded without the necessary planning permission and commenced early in 2020. Obviously, COVID interrupted the sort of the development of it from a commercial providing of accommodation, and the application has since been submitted and considered by the planning service. The site, just to give a bit of context, you can see this small red star here. It sits above Bridge of Allan itself on Pendreich Road, which takes you to the sort of northwest of Bridge of Allan, rises quite steeply above the town and forms a loop in Cambridge, so that also leads to local walks. So a popular route from sort of local recreational use walkers, etc., cyclists. This slide shows the development itself, so accommodation units here and here, car parking here, has a history of use as a livery stable and riding centre. I think that's now ceased for the time being, and there's also some pods accommodation pods here, all in situ at the moment. And the access comes out onto Pendreich Road just at that point there. Some photographs of the arrangement. So this is the site access here. This is looking south. You can see some of the kind of elevated views of Wallace Monument in the background there. Looking north, west across the site, so the access and the building that, depending on whose view you're taking, it obstructs the visibility, sits here. A longer distance view showing some of the pods on site. And again, the access here, the road verge, stone wall, etc. And this is a close-up view of the site access. So consideration really is the point where, and this is the subject of the review statement and the ensuing correspondence associated with the application, is where you measure the visibility display from, and also the size of the visibility display. Okay, end of presentation. I'll just escape from that. Continue with the written, spoken presentation. Road service consultation response and ensuing correspondence, pages 213 to 230. Further comments from the planning application case officer and proposed conditions, page 232 to 236. A speed survey report, September 2021, submitted in response to the case officer's comments, pages 237 to 248. And relevant development plan policies, pages 249 to 250. These are primary policy 1, site placemaking, and policy 1.1 site planning, with paragraph A including the requirement for new development to be safely accessed. Summary of the review statement is noted that whether or not a 2.4 metres by 70 metres visibility display can be provided depends on where you take the 2.4 measurement from, i.e. the point that's taken as being the back edge of the carriageway. There's a difference in opinion between the applicant's transport consultants and the road service, as is highlighted in the review statement. Recent road surfacing, including unilaterally extending the tarmac into the applicant's site, has also created the impression that the road is wider at this point rather than of a similar width to the rest. The applicant would also raise the issue with a comment that these will generate a significant amount of traffic. This has not been her experience to date. Also, current movements are more evenly spread out through the day than they were previously. It's also considered the Transport Solutions consultants' comments that the road is used by walkers, runners, cyclists and horse riders. The vehicle speeds are likely to be lower than 30 miles an hour, probably around 20 miles an hour. And this is verified to some extent by the subsequent speed survey. September 21 already mentioned, and suggestion is actually 2.4 by 550 metres, and possibly 2.4 by 33 metres would be appropriate. It's therefore concluded a safe access can be provided to serve the development proposals. Traffic speeds in this section of Pendreich Road are so low that there's no road safety risks created by the use of this junction for the purposes of serving the proposed development. Okay, thank you. End of presentation.
Thanks, Richard. Any questions to the officer? I'll maybe kick it off, Richard. You mentioned the riding school. When it was given planning permission, was there any concerns over the junction at that point? That's the first question.
I haven't checked the planning history, Councillor, apologies, but that I think it's a long established unit within that farm. And it seems to have sort of actually reduced in level. In fact, there's a statement in the submissions to that effect. For that note, I think the riding school became a livery service, which has now also ceased. There may well still be some riding activity within the complex, but not necessarily the riding school itself. But I haven't got that information directly.
When you look at pages 206, 207, you get an indication of the scale of the development. So that would be a question I would like answered. The other point, you mentioned 30 mile an hour, and now look at that road, and I would imagine we could apply 20 quite easily. Was that ever given any consideration that would reduce it? Equally, And I'm sure there's more work to be done because it's just a plain road. There's no road markings. I suspect that you could do quite a bit of work to make it clear that there's a junction approaching.
Again, the first point about introducing 20-mile-an-hour limits, I know that's increasingly been a practice. I don't know so that would apply, or can be readily applied to roads out with the urban area under current guidance, and the signage as well relies on compliance with standard sort of guidance on appropriateness of signages, indicate like junctions and other safety issues. So I can't really comment on that because it's just beyond my sort of professional remit to make comments on that at this point in time.
Oh, that's understood, Richard. That's the two questions I would have liked to have asked. Councillor Houston?
Thank you. Can I just clarify? I was saying that there's a current restriction of 30 miles on the road.
No, there will be it's what's called e-restricted, which effectively
so it's 60.
Ah, right.
Out with the urban area, not like the street. So by definition, any road, unless otherwise signed, is 60.
Right. Yes, and knowing the road, you would never do 60 and live. And it is more appropriate at a much lower speed just because of the height and the narrowness of the road as well. But like Councillor Thompson, there's a suggestion in the submission, of course, that the usage of this entrance when it was a riding school and livery stables was higher, and now that's gone. Was there any? Do you know if there was any consideration taken that by the drop in usage there is simply being compensated by the application that's been made, and therefore kind of equalising out that there's not really an overall increase?
There is a comment, if you bear with me, I'll see if I can track it down. The road service might be highlighted this. If you just hold on, please. The road service is aware that the visibility, the delivery service has reduced. Yes, if you refer to page 215 of the agenda papers, the comments from the roads engineer Stephen Spears say also that we are aware the riding school previously at the farm is not in operation, and as such, the trips associated with the use are not currently existing. Whether to be a control measure whereby the riding school could not be brought back into operation, our initial comments that the proposed development represents an increase in trips could be omitted from consideration, but this does not affect our assessment of the visibility. So they are aware that the riding school has ceased being a standard of access visibility in the current standards.
Is there any control the council has over the reintroduction of a riding school? Would they need to therefore reapply for permission to operate that because of an increase in potential traffic?
I mean, it's clearly, at one point it must have been a working farm, and then it's diversified into various alternative uses. Quite what takes place here from an agricultural point of view of the riding school, you just have to effectively live with that. That's all get consented. You can't really change that. If the riding school activities have reduced or ceased for commercial reasons, there's nothing to say that won't necessarily start up again, and there's nothing from a planning perspective that says that would be unauthorised. Just the sort of ebb and flow of commercial activity on any property, it may well revive if there's sufficient interest or somebody else might come along and operate it. And that would be, there'd have to be a long-term abandonment of that use, and there's nothing to indicate that as a case. It might just have been in a sort of lull period for obvious reasons, and could be revived as well. So that's beyond the control of the council for sure, from a planning perspective. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brisley?
Yes, the bit that confuses me a little is the two differing views of where exactly the access should be. According to the planning consultant, if it's measured from where they see that the road, actually the boundary starts, it meets the requirements. If it's measured from where our transport officers measure it, it doesn't. And what do we, how do we decide in that situation which one is correct? I mean, I would like to see someone establish for me exactly where the boundary is and have an accurate measurement from that edge as to what the visibility is, because it seems to be the only thing that goes against the application is the access and visibility.
Yes, to answer the last point, that is the case. It's really a consideration of the access and the associated safety issues. Again, referring to page 215, the roads service engineer and his colleague have been out to the site, so it has clearly stated they have measured it and formed an opinion as to where that carriageway edge is. Through a site visit. It's complicated slightly, as is highlighted by the agent, that road has been resurfaced since the visit by the road service. And it might not necessarily be the case that the actual carriageway edge is as clearly defined as it might have been when the road service was out, but you've still got, as you're saying, a requirement to define exactly where that is, which then informs the extent of the visibility, so where the point where you take the visibility. And one view, as expressed by the road services, the visibility can't be met, and the view from the agent's side of things and the applicant's side of things can be met. So there is a professional differences of opinion here from the roads engineers, both the council and the applicant's roads engineers as well. And the next question also is the extent of the visibility, and again it depends on coming to a decision based on national standards as to whether certain distances apply or other distances apply. And again, I can't comment really on that one way or another. I'm afraid it's a professional engineering view that has to be taken on that.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you.
Just on this particular point then, how are we as a local review body, given that we've got two sets of professional opinions put in front of us, how do we settle on one of them? It's because well, that's the question. How do we, two sets of professional opinion, how do we know which one is, well, they may both be correct, but one saying if you measure it from a different point, then you get a different answer, naturally. I'm not sure how I can settle on which one we should take a view on.
A hearing has been requested, a site visit, a hearing, as with the Lake Camera, when a hearing and a site visit has been requested. So from that point of view, that's the opportunity to consider maybe this in a bit more detail as well. And as with Lake Camera, Homes development, the two sides can maybe put forward a case in a bit more detail. And maybe answer that question, Councillor Brisley, exactly where do you measure the visibility from? You get a conclusion on that.
It comes back to the point I made earlier. There's no white lines in order for us to make that judgment, or officers, in fact.
Yeah.
So I'm of the view that we do have a hearing, but I'm also, it's been made clear by all three of us, there's contradictory information there. I don't know if we are allowed to invite a professional roads engineer from Stirling Council in order to try and verify that, or is it just done, Sheila, can it only be done through written statement? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay, Chair. No, we can invite someone like that, but it would be up to them whether they agree to come along or not. So can do that, or you can ask for a further written submission. Perhaps you would like to have that, so you have the two pieces of information in front of you. That might be more useful, perhaps, than a hearing, or as well as.
Well, I think there's been a request for a hearing, and I would like to hear from the applicant in any case. But equally, I think we need to have either a written statement. But again, I'd much prefer, and I take your point, they don't have to attend, but at least a written statement, but preferably a written statement and an officer present that we could question. Are we in agreement?
Yes, I agree with that.
I agree too.
Okay, thank you. So, Richard, you've got your hand up?
Oh, apologies.
The usual legacy hand. Okay, thanks, Richard. That's the decision. We will have a hearing and a request for additional information. That's the last item on the agenda. Can I thank everybody for attending? Richard, there was a photograph there that I think you should put into some kind of art gallery of you, the shadow, etc. It looks great. But on that basis, thanks everybody for attending, and we will follow this up at the next meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.